We're told a true mate's rejection is the final death, that once the bond is severed, the rejected is supposed to fade quietly into nothing. But some alphas don't just reject you, they drag you in front of the entire kingdom, press their claws to your throat, and declare your womb a tomb, barren, useless, unworthy of the obsidian throne. Mine did, and the pack cheered while my heart turned to ash in my chest. 3 years later, when the scar tissue over that day had finally stopped bleeding, a black-edged invitation arrived, sealed with the royal crest. Inside, in Darian's own arrogant scrawl, an invitation to the naming ceremony of the daughter his new Luna had finally given him. One last twist of the knife. One final command to watch the future I was supposedly too broken to provide. They thought exile had finished me, no? They thought the rumors of my barrenness had followed me into the human wilds and buried me there. They never imagined I spent those 3 years raising an empire of my own, one fierce heartbeat at a time. A true-born son hidden beneath my cloak. 2 orphaned high-alpha heirs I pulled from the ashes of Viridia's secret purges. 3 children who carry the oldest, purest bloodlines in shifter history, and every single one of them calls me mother. Darian wanted the broken girl he threw away to limp into his hall in rags so the court could laugh one final time. Viridia wanted the barren reject to see her triumph and crumble. Instead, they're getting me in blood-red silk, 3 living alpha heirs at my side, and the truth sharp enough to cut a kingdom in half. Tonight, I don't just walk back in, I end them. If your pulse is already pounding and you're ready to watch a rejected queen in a blood-red gown burn an entire kingdom down for her children, then you're exactly where you belong. Hit that subscribe button on Judy's Romance Library right now so this story lands in your hands the second new chapters drop. I still remember the exact second the bond died. Not the moment Darian's mouth formed the words, because words are just noise. I remember the moment the golden thread that had lived behind my ribs for 19 years snapped like a guillotine wire. We were on the raised dais of the obsidian Great Hall, moonlight pouring through the stained glass moon above us. The entire kingdom had come to witness the new Alpha King claim his fated Luna. I had worn white. He had worn contempt. "Lena Voss," he announced, voice ringing off the marble like a verdict. "I, Darian Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Obsidian Crown, reject you as my mate and Luna. Your womb is barren. Your blood is weak. You will never sit on no throne beside me." The hall erupted in howls of approval. Viridia, silver-haired, viper-smiling, already glowing with the false swell of a pregnancy that would later be called a miracle, stepped forward to take my place before my knees even hit the stone. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply bled from the inside while the mate bond burned itself to cinders. That night they stripped me of my title, my pack, my name. They branded the rejection sigil into the soft skin beneath my left breast, 3 claw marks crossed by a broken crown, so every shifter on the continent would know I was ruined goods. Then they marched me to the border at dawn and told me if I ever returned, I would be killed on sight. I was 5 weeks pregnant and didn't know it yet. I found out in a human gas station bathroom 3 weeks later, staring at 2 pink lines while rain hammered the tin roof. I laughed until I vomited. Barren, he'd called me. The moon goddess apparently has a vicious sense of humor. For 3 years I vanished. I learned how to hide silver eyes behind colored contacts, how to mute my scent with wolfsbane and motor oil, how to forge papers that said I was nobody. I gave birth to our son alone in a motel off I-40, biting a leather belt so I wouldn't scream loud enough to bring the pack hunter still sniffing the wind for me. I named him Cassian. He shifted for the first time at 14 months and shattered every mirror in the room with his newborn howl. That was the night I found the others. 2 small, starving children hiding in the basement of a burned-out pack house on the edge of Viridia's old territory. A boy with the royal crescent birthmark of the Crescent High Alphas on his shoulder. a girl with the midnight eyes of the Eclipse bloodline. Both scheduled for disposal because Viridia couldn't risk any rival heirs growing up. I took them. I burned the disposal orders. I became the monster mothers tell their pups about, the ghost in red who steals children destined for graves. 3 years of running, 3 years of training them to hide their power, to walk soft, to survive. 3 years of whispering to Cashin that his father was a story, not a man. 3 years of promising the wards that no one would ever hurt them again. Then the invitation came. Heavy black cardstock, silver wax seal, Darian's crest, my old crest, pressed into it like a brand. You are cordially invited to the naming ceremony of Her Royal Highness, Princess Aveline Blackthorn, firstborn daughter of Alpha King Darian and Luna Viridia. The words blurred, not from tears. From rage so pure it felt like holiness. Cashin, now 8 years old, tall for his age, silver eyes exactly like his father's, found me holding the card with shaking fingers. "Are we going, Mama?" he asked quietly. The wards, Lyric and Ezra, stood behind him in the doorway of our safe house. Lyric's tiny hand rested on the hilt of the dagger I'd taught her to throw at 6. Ezra's gaze was steady, ancient, already carrying the weight of the throne that had murdered his parents. I looked at my 3 impossible heirs, my living proof, my weapons, my heart walking outside my body, and felt the last piece of the broken girl I'd been die for good. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "We're going." I hung the invitation on the wall and used it for target practice until the silver wax ran like blood. Then I went to the trunk at the foot of my bed and pulled out the gown I'd sewn in secret over 3 long years. Crimson silk, the color of fresh arterial blood, cut to flow like liquid fire when I walked. No pack colors, no submission, just war. Darian wanted the Barren reject to watch him crown his perfect new family. Viridia wanted to dance on my grave in pearl-embroidered slippers. They were about to learn what happens when you invite a mother wolf to a slaughter wearing the pelt of her enemies she's already killed. I folded the gown into the suitcase beside 3 tiny formal suits. Black, severe, perfect. Cassian touched the red silk with careful fingers. "Will Father be surprised?" he asked. I smiled, and it felt like sharpening a blade. "Baby," I said, "he's going to forget how to breathe." We left before dawn the next morning. 4 shadows in a stolen car heading straight for the heart of the kingdom that threw us away. The Obsidian Palace was waiting. So was the Alpha King who thought he'd killed me with 4 words and a brand. He was wrong. I was never the one who was barren. He was. Barren of mercy, barren of foresight, barren of the ability to imagine that the woman he broke would come back leading the future he thought he'd erased. The mark of exile burned under my ribs like a second heartbeat. Tonight, I was going to carve a new one into him. Let the ceremony begin. The Obsidian Palace had not changed. Same vaulted ceilings painted midnight blue. Same marble floors veined with silver that drank the moonlight. Same throne dais at the far end, raised like a stage for gods and monsters. Tonight, the gods were absent. The monsters had dressed for the occasion. I stepped through the arched entrance at the exact stroke of midnight, the hour reserved for royal processions. Crimson silk slid across the floor behind me like spilled blood. The gown left my shoulders bare, the rejection brand hidden beneath a lace choker of black diamonds, worn like a collar turned into a crown. Cashin walked 1 pace ahead, small shoulders squared inside his black suit, silver eyes already glowing with the promise of the alpha he would become. Lyric and Ezra flanked him, 1 on each side, a perfect honor guard of children who had survived genocide. All 3 wore white moonstone cufflinks that caught the torchlight like stars. 4 heartbeats, 1 war cry wearing silk. The hall was packed. Every alpha, Luna, and council elder on the continent had come to coo over Viridia's miracle pup. Conversation died the instant we appeared. 1,000 noses lifted at once, scenting the air. Impossible. Unmistakable. High alpha blood, 3 distinct ancient lines, moving through the room like a blade through flesh. I felt the moment Darien saw us. He was standing beside the throne, one hand on Viridia's waist, the other raised to accept another toast. The crystal goblet slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble. Good. Viridia recovered first. She always did. She glided forward in a gown of pearl and frost. Infant daughter swaddled in silver on her hip. The smile she gave me was razor-thin and dripping venom. "Lena," she purred, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "How charitable of you to accept our little invitation. Though I see you've brought strays." Her gaze flicked to the children with theatrical pity. "The palace does have an orphanage wing, if you're looking to finally unburden yourself." A ripple of cruel laughter swept the crowd. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I simply kept walking. The children matched my stride perfectly. 10 feet, 20. The crowd parted like water before a shark. Cassian's tiny hand brushed mine, just once, for strength. I squeezed back. Viridia tried again, voice rising in pitch. "Really, darling, rags would have been kinder. Red is so desperate on a woman past her prime." Still no one stopped us. We reached the foot of the dais. Only then did I pause. I looked up, slowly, and met Darien's eyes for the first time in 3 years. He had not moved. He looked like someone had struck him across the face with a frozen blade. His mouth was open. His pupils were blown wide, black swallowing silver. I saw the exact second he scented them, the exact second the truth detonated behind his eyes. The boy in front, my son, his son, had the same cheekbones, same proud tilt of the head. The girl with the midnight stare of the eclipse line Viridia had sworn extinct. The boy with the crescent birthmark burning through the collar of his shirt like a brand of judgment. Darien made a sound, half gasp, half wounded animal. Viridia felt the shift in the room. Her smile cracked. She clutched the baby tighter and took one involuntary step back. I finally spoke. My voice carried to the rafters without effort, calm, cold, and laced with 3 years of sleepless nights. "Thank you for the invitation, Your Majesty." I dipped into the shallowest, most insulting curtsy possible. "I brought gifts for the new princess." I lifted my hand. Cassian, Lyric, and Ezra stepped forward in perfect unison. 3 children, 3 ancient bloodlines, 3 living indictments. Cassian's eyes locked on his father's. He did not blink. Then, without warning, without permission, my son opened his mouth and let out a howl. Not a child's cry, not a pup's yip. A pure, shattering alpha command that slammed into every wolf in the hall like a physical blow. Glasses exploded, knees buckled, even the torches guttered as if the moon herself had leaned down to listen. The sound said one thing. In the oldest language we have, "I am here. I am his. And you are all liars." Silence fell. Absolute. Suffocating. Darien dropped to one knee. Not in reverence. In surrender. Viridia's face went the color of old ash. I smiled, slow, terrible, beautiful. "Let the naming ceremony begin," I said softly. The red gauntlet had been thrown, and the entire kingdom just watched their king pick it up with trembling fingers. The hall was still ringing with the aftershock of Cassian's howl when the high priestess shuffled forward, clutching the ancient moon bowl like it might bite her. No one had recovered. Half the nobles were still on their knees. The other half looked ready to bolt. Darien had not risen. He remained on one knee at the edge of the dais, head bowed, chest heaving as though Cassian's command had punched the air from his lungs. His eyes, those silver eyes I once loved, were fixed on our son with something between worship and terror. Viridia was the only one still pretending the world hadn't tilted on its axis. She thrust the infant forward like a shield. "Continue!" she snapped at the priestess, voice brittle as frost. "The princess awaits her name." The old woman hesitated, glancing at me, at the 3 children standing like small statues beside me, then at the Alpha King reduced to kneeling in his own hall. But Viridia's glare could flay flesh. The priestess dipped her fingers into the moon bowl and began the rite. I watched the baby. She was beautiful, of course. Viridia would never allow anything less. Porcelain skin, a tiny cap of silver blonde curls. But the moment the priestess lifted her toward the skylight so Celine could witness the naming, I felt it. Nothing. No spark. No latent power humming under the skin. No alpha aura waiting to unfurl. Just the soft, ordinary scent of a human newborn. The pack felt it too. 1,000 shifter noses twitched. 1,000 pairs of eyes narrowed. The false smiles that had been plastered on every face since the doors opened began to slide off like melting wax. Viridia kept talking. Too loud. Too fast. "Behold Aveline Celine Blackthorn, firstborn daughter of the Obsidian Crown, blessed by the goddess." The words rang hollow. I took one step up the dais, just one. The marble felt warm under my bare feet, as if the palace itself recognized its true Luna. "May I see the princess?" I asked, soft enough that only the front rows heard. Viridia's arms tightened around the child. For the first time, real fear flickered across her perfect face. Darien finally moved. He rose slowly, like an old man, and turned toward his Luna. The question forming in his eyes was one he had never thought he would have to ask. Viridia saw it. She pivoted, placing the baby into the priestess's arms as if generosity itself, then spread her hands in a show of innocence. "Of course the exiled may look upon our miracle," she said sweetly. "Perhaps it will ease the sting of her own shortcomings." The priestess, trembling, brought the infant to me. I leaned down. The child blinked up at me with pale blue eyes. Pretty, human, empty. I inhaled once, deeply. Human milk on her breath, no trace of shifter blood, not even a whisper of Darien's scent. I straightened. The entire hall waited for my verdict. I gave it. "She's lovely," I said, loud enough for the back rows this time. "Tell me, Viridia, whose milk has she been drinking?" A gasp rippled outward. Viridia went very still. I saw the calculation flash behind her eyes. Deny, deflect, destroy. Before she could choose, Cassian moved. He climbed the 3 steps to the dais with the unhurried grace of a prince born to it. Lyric and Ezra followed, silent shadows. Cassian stopped directly in front of the priestess and the infant. He studied the baby the way a wolf studies a rabbit that has wandered too far from its burrow. Then he turned to the assembly and spoke for the first time since we entered the hall. His voice was clear, young, and carried the unmistakable ring of command. "This child is not my sister," he said. "She is not obsidian. She is not even wolf." He looked straight at Viridia. "You stole my father's throne," he told her, calm as winter. "But you will not steal mine." The false smiles were gone now. In their place, shock, fury, hunger. The pack had scented the lie, and wolves, true wolves, never forgive a pretender on the throne. Viridia's mask finally shattered. She lunged for the baby, claws extending, ready to silence the only witness who could not yet speak. I was faster. I caught her wrist midair, twisted, and slammed her to her knees in one clean motion. The sound of her bones grinding was loud in the sudden silence. I leaned down until my lips brushed her ear. "Careful," I whispered. "The floor is marble. Wouldn't want the princess to see her mother bleed before her naming is complete." Then I released her and stepped back, crimson silk swirling like battle flags. Darian was staring at the infant, at Cassian, at me, as though the goddess herself had walked in and rewritten his entire life in fire. The priestess, forgotten, still held the human child. I turned to the assembly and smiled the smile I had practiced in 100 dark mirrors. "The throne," I said pleasantly, "appears to be occupied by frauds." I looked at Darian. "Shall we fix that, my king?" The false throne had cracked. Now it was time to burn it down. The hall had become a held breath. Every wolf in the kingdom stood frozen between instinct and disbelief, waiting for someone, anyone, to tell them what they had just scented was impossible. Viridia was still on her knees, cradling her wrist, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Darian had not yet moved, not yet spoken, only stared at Cassian, as though the boy were the moon fallen to earth. The priestess, trembling so hard the moon bowl rattled, tried to finish the rite anyway. "By the light of Selene, I name this child." Cassian turned his head. Not toward the priestess, not toward Viridia, directly toward Darian, father to son, blood to blood. I saw it happen the way a mother always sees it coming, a heartbeat before the storm breaks. Cassian's small chest expanded, his silver eyes ignited, pupils blown wide with ancient, untamed power. The rejection brand beneath my own ribs burned in sudden sympathy, as though the broken bond was screaming to be remembered. He opened his mouth, and the howl came. It was not loud at first. It was pure, a single perfect note that started in the bones of the earth and rose through his tiny body like a blade of white fire. Then it detonated. The sound hit the hall like a physical force. Chandeliers exploded in showers of crystal, banners ripped from their poles. Every wolf in the room, alpha, beta, warrior, elder, dropped to their knees as one. Throats bared in involuntary submission. Even I staggered half a step, tears springing to my eyes from the sheer weight of it. It was the howl of a born king recognizing his territory, the howl of a son claiming his father across a severed bond, the howl of truth too long buried to stay silent any longer. Darian was slammed backward into the throne as though an invisible hand had shoved him. His spine bowed. A choked, broken sound tore out of him, half sob, half answering roar. The bond that had been shredded 3 years ago flared back to life between them, golden and furious and undeniable. I felt it snap into place inside my own chest like a bone resetting. Cassian's howl climbed higher, wilder, until the stained glass moon above us cracked straight down the middle, a jagged silver scar across Selene's face. And then, clear as temple bells, woven through the howl and chaos, came the word every wolf in the hall heard inside their skull. "Father." The howl cut off as suddenly as it began. Silence crashed down, heavier than the roar. Cassian swayed, suddenly pale, legs trembling from the power that had just torn through him. I caught him before he fell, pulling him against my side. Every eye turned to Darian. The Alpha King was on his knees again, this time in the center of the dais, palms pressed to the marble, head thrown back. Tears streaked his face. He looked ruined. He looked reborn. He looked at Cassian, at our son, and the words came out broken, raw. Centuries of arrogance burned away in one primal note. "My son," he whispered, then louder, a vow to the entire hall. "My son?" Viridia screamed. It was not a human sound. It was the sound of a liar watching her entire empire collapse under the weight of 8-year-old truth. She lunged, not for the baby, not for Darian, but for Cassian. Claws out, murder in her eyes. I stepped between them without thought, red silk flaring like wings. My own growl answered hers, low, maternal, final. "Touch him," I said, very softly, "and I will wear your pelt as a cloak before sunrise." She froze. Behind me, Cassian straightened in my arms. He looked at his father, really looked, for the first time. Darian crawled forward, literally crawled, until he was close enough to reach out a shaking hand. Cassian studied it, then, slowly, solemnly, placed his smaller hand in his father's. The bond flared again, visible this time, threads of gold and obsidian light wrapping around their joined hands. Darian made a sound like a man dying and Wolf grieving at once. "I didn't know," he rasped. "Goddess forgive me. I didn't know." Cassian tilted his head, considering. Then he said, clear and calm, the sentence that ended the false reign forever. "You know now." The primal truth had spoken, and the hall had heard it in their blood. There was only one heir to the obsidian throne standing in this room, and he was holding his father's hand while his mother stood over them both in blood-red silk, ready to burn the world down to keep him safe. The ceremony was over. The war had just begun. The hall was still kneeling in the echo of Cassian's howl when Darian rose, not as a king reclaiming his throne, as a man who had just been gutted in front of his entire kingdom and was trying to remember how lungs worked. He turned to Viridia. 1 step. 2. Each footfall rang like a death knell. She tried to hold his gaze, tried to summon the same honeyed smile that had wrapped him around her finger for 3 years. It cracked the moment his shadow fell over her. "Darian," she started, voice trembling with practiced fragility. "This is madness. She's clearly—" "Whose child is it?" he asked. Quiet. Flat. The kind of quiet that comes right before an execution. Viridia's mouth opened, closed. The infant, still in the priestess's arms, began to cry, ordinary human wails that suddenly obscene in the silence. Darian didn't blink. "Whose child is it?" Viridia's eyes flicked to the side, just a fraction. I saw it. Darian saw it. Half the hall saw it. A tall figure in the crimson livery of the royal guard detached himself from the shadows near the eastern archway. Broad shoulders. Scar across the throat. Human scent under cheap cologne. Zane, Viridia's lover. The real father of the miracle pup. The man who had been warming the Luna's bed while the Alpha King slept alone in his. I felt the shift in the air the way you feel lightning before it strikes. Viridia's fingers twitched, 3 short, 1 long. A signal. Zane's hand slid inside his jacket. Darian saw that too. Something ancient and lethal woke behind his silver eyes. "Answer me," he said again, voice dropping into the register that made entire armies piss themselves. "Or I will rip the truth out of your throat right here." Viridia's mask shattered completely. She backed up until her spine hit the throne, clutching at the carved obsidian armrests like claws. "It's not what you think," she started. Darian roared. The sound cracked the marble beneath his feet. Every wolf in the room flinched, except 3 small ones standing beside me. Cassian pressed closer to my leg. Lyric's tiny hand found Ezra's. They knew. Children raised in shadows always know when death is moving through a room. Viridia's gaze darted again, frantic now, to Zane. Zane had a silver dagger in his hand now, half hidden against his thigh. His eyes met Viridia's for a single heartbeat. "Do it now!" her stare screamed. "While he's distracted, while the boy is close." I moved before I thought. One moment I was beside my children, the next I was between Darian and the blade I knew was coming. Darien sensed me, or maybe the newly reawakened bond screamed warning, because he spun, arms snapping out to shove me behind him. "No!" he started. Too late. Zane lunged, not at Darien, at Cassian. The dagger flashed silver death toward my son's heart. Time slowed to honey. I heard myself scream, something wordless, feral. Saw Darien pivot, too far to reach. Saw Viridia's face twist into triumphant horror. Then two things happened at once. Lyric, quiet, deadly Lyric, stepped forward and spoke a single word in the old High Alpha tongue, a word that had not been heard in 2 centuries. The torches flared white, and Ezra, sweet, silent Ezra, flicked his wrist. A thin wire of shadow snapped out from his sleeve, wrapped Zane's ankle, and yanked. The assassin went down hard, dagger skittering across the floor. I was already moving. I landed on Zane like vengeance made flesh, knee in his throat, claws at his jugular. "Touch my son," I hissed into his shocked face, "and I will feed you your own heart." Behind me, Darien grabbed Viridia by the throat and slammed her against the throne so hard the obsidian cracked. "Call him off," he snarled, fangs fully extended. "Call him off or I start removing pieces." Viridia choked, tears streaking perfect makeup. "Zane," she rasped. Zane laughed. Wet. Broken. "Too late, Luna," he spat. "The poison's already in his cup. One way or another, the Blackthorn line ends tonight." Darien froze. I felt it too, the faint burn in the back of my throat. Wolfsbane and Nightshade, slow acting, tasteless. He'd drunk from the ceremonial goblet right before the howl. Viridia smiled through bloodied lips. "Checkmate," she whispered. The hall erupted into chaos. Wolves shifting, guards shouting, nobles scrambling for exits. Darien swayed, poison hitting his bloodstream. I stood slowly, wiping Zane's blood from my claws onto my red silk. "No," I said, voice cutting through the panic like a bell. I looked at my 3 children, unflinching, unafraid. Then at Darien, whose knees were starting to buckle. Then at Viridia, still pinned and smiling like she'd won. "Not checkmate," I told her. I smiled back. "Just the opening move." I turned to the hall and let my own alpha aura unfurl for the first time in 3 years. Crimson, vicious, maternal. "Royal Guard!" I called, and every soldier in Blackthorn Crimson dropped to their knees without hesitation. "Arrest the false Luna and her human dog. The true heir has returned, and I am done asking nicely." The lies were exposed, the blades were drawn, and the real war had only just begun. They dragged Viridia and Zane away in silver chains, but the poison was already crawling through Darien's veins. I saw it in the tremor of his hands, the faint gray cast under his golden skin, the way his pupils flickered between wolf and man. He was fighting it with everything he had, but Wolfsbane laced with Nightshade is a patient killer. He tried to stand straight on the dais, to give orders, to pretend the crown still fit. It didn't. I walked up the 3 steps alone. The children stayed below, 3 small sentinels in black, watching everything with unblinking eyes. When I reached him, the entire hall fell silent again. Even the torches seemed to hush. Darien looked at me like I was a ghost he'd spent 3 years trying to exorcise. "Lena," he rasped, voice cracking. "The healers." "Will be too late," I finished for him. "You know the dose they used." "You have maybe 20 minutes before your heart stops." His jaw clenched. Pride tried to rise. Pain crushed it. I stepped closer, close enough that the scent of him, pine, smoke, and now poison, filled my lungs again after 3 empty years. The bond between us throbbed like an open wound, suddenly remembering it could still bleed. I did not touch him. "I'm not here to scream at you," I said quietly. "I'm here to make you see." He swallowed hard. "I see my son." "Look harder." I turned and gestured. Lyric and Ezra climbed the dais without being asked. Two small shadows carrying the weight of murdered kingdoms. Lyric spoke first, voice soft but steady, the accent of the lost royalty threading every word. "My mother was High Alpha Selene of the Crescent Pack," she said, looking straight at Darian. "Viridia told you the Crescent Line died of plague. That was a lie." Ezra pulled down the collar of his tiny suit jacket. The Royal Crescent birthmark glowed faintly, same as the one hidden beneath Cassian's shirt. "My father was High Alpha Orion of the Eclipse Throne," Ezra continued, voice flat with old grief. "Viridia told you he lost a challenge and fled in disgrace." Another lie. They were poisoned in their beds. I was 3. Lyric was 4. We were supposed to disappear next. Darian swayed. I watched the truth hit him like silver bullets. Every border war he'd been told was rebellion. Every ally who mysteriously died. Every report that painted Viridia as the perfect, fertile savior while I was branded Barren. All of it orchestrated. He looked at me, really looked. At the 2 children who should not exist. Then at Cassian, standing between them like the bridge between lost thrones and the future. His knees finally gave out. He dropped in front of the 3 of them, not in submission this time, but in devastation. "I sent assassins after my own blood," he whispered, voice breaking. I let her murder innocents so she could—" He couldn't finish. I crouched so we were eye to eye. "You didn't let her," I said, cold and precise. "She made sure you never had the chance to know. Every advisor who questioned her disappeared. Every messenger who carried rumors from the border was found with his tongue cut out. Every record that might have shown the Crescent and Eclipse lines still lived was burned. She isolated you the way a spider webs a fly, slowly, beautifully, until you thanked her for the silk." A tear cut through the blood on his cheek. "I was blind," he said. "Yes." I did not soften it. "You were." Lyric stepped forward and placed something small in Darian's shaking hand. A signet ring, black obsidian, crescent moon carved deep. The ring of her dead mother. Ezra laid a second object on top of it, a tiny eclipse pendant still crusted with old blood. "Proof," Ezra said simply. "We kept them when the palace burned." Darian closed his fist around both relics like they burned. His gaze found mine again. The king was gone. Only the man left, broken, poisoned, desperate. "Tell me how to fix this," he begged. "You start by living long enough to try," I answered. I turned to the hall. "Clear the dais. Bring me Moonshade, Yarrow, and the royal blood stores. Now!" Wolves scrambled to obey, not because I wore a crown. Because every soul in the room finally remembered who the real Luna was. I looked back down at Darian. "Hold on for 19 more minutes," I told him. "Then you get to spend the rest of your life earning the right to breathe the same air as your son." He nodded, tears falling unchecked. Behind us, Viridia's screams echoed from the dungeons, furious, terrified, already tasting the noose. I ignored her. I had children to save a kingdom for, and a mate, poisoned, humbled, and still stupidly, infuriatingly mine, to keep alive long enough to grovel properly. The treason was no longer whispered. It was screaming, and I was the one holding the knife. 19 minutes. I had counted every heartbeat since I gave the order. The healers were still scrambling with moonshade and blood when the dungeon doors exploded open. Zane came through them like a demon loosed from chains. Silver manacles dangled from one wrist, snapped clean in half. His guard uniform was shredded, soaked in the blood of the wolves who had tried to hold him. His eyes were fixed on Darien with the way a wolf looks at wounded prey. In his right hand, a second silver dagger, longer than the first, already dripping black with the same poison that was killing my mate. The hall froze for one stunned second. Then Zane moved. Fast. Too fast for a human. He vaulted the marble balustrade, hit the dais running, and drove straight for Darien's heart. Darien was half collapsed against the throne, pupils blown, lips turning blue. He saw death coming and tried to rise anyway. Instinct, pride, whatever was left of the king. He never had a chance. I was already there. I stepped between them the way a mother wolf steps between her cub and a hunter. Zane's blade met my palm instead of Darien's chest. I caught it. Barehanded. The silver-seared flesh hissed against bone, but I twisted hard and ripped the dagger free of his grip before the poison could fully bite. Then I slammed my forehead into his face. Cartilage crunched. He staggered back, roaring. The hall detonated. Wolves shifted mid-scream. Nobles scrambled over each other to flee, benches overturned. But every warrior in the room hesitated, because no one had ever taught them what to do when the rejected, barren exile suddenly moved like a war goddess. I didn't wait. I drove forward. Knee to his gut, elbow to the back of his skull as he doubled. Claws raking across the tendons behind his knee so he dropped. He hit the marble hard. I followed him down, straddling his chest, forearm across his throat. He thrashed, stronger than any human had a right to be, Viridia's blood rituals, no doubt. But I had carried 3 alpha heirs across continents, killed rogue wolves with my bare hands, and survived 3 years of hell for this moment. He was not stronger than that. I pressed until his eyes bulged. "Wrong throat!" I snarled into his face. "You should have come for mine." Behind me, Darien's ragged voice. "Lena!" I didn't turn. Couldn't, because Zane smiled through bloodied teeth and whispered, "Too late." A second blade flashed from his sleeve, this one aimed under my ribs. I twisted at the last second. The dagger sliced silken skin, a hot line of fire across my side. I hissed, but I did not let go. Instead, I slammed his own broken manacle spike through the meat of his shoulder and pinned him to the marble like an insect. He screamed. The sound cut off when my claws found his throat. I leaned close. "Tell Viridia," I whispered. "The Barren bitch sends her regards." Then I looked up. The entire hall had gone still again. Hundreds of wolves, warriors twice my size, alphas who had sneered at me for years, stared at me like I had grown a second head. At the woman in the blood-soaked red gown who had just disarmed a professional assassin in 3 heartbeats while bleeding, smiling, terrifying. Darien was staring too. His mouth was open. His eyes were wide with something that looked a lot like awe and a lot like fear. I rose slowly, leaving Zane writhing and pinned. Blood dripped from my fingertips onto the white marble. Mine, his, didn't matter. I turned to the stunned royal guard. "Take him to the cells," I said, voice perfectly calm. "Alive. I'm not finished with him." 4 guards rushed forward, suddenly remembering how legs worked. I walked the 3 steps back to Darien. He was on his knees again, one hand pressed to his chest, fighting the poison with everything he had left. I knelt in front of him, cupped his face with hands that still smelled of another man's blood. "Look at me," I ordered. His eyes, silver, glassy, terrified, met mine. "You are not dying tonight," I told him. Then I sliced my own wrist with the dagger I'd taken from Zane, pressed the wound to his mouth, and let Alpha Luna blood, ancient, pure, furious, pour down his throat. He choked, tried to pull away. I held him harder. "Drink," I commanded, the bond flaring white-hot between us. "That's an order from your Luna." He drank. The gray left his lips. Color flooded back into his face, and in the chaos of the shattered hall, with my children watching wide-eyed and an entire kingdom on its knees. Darian Blackthorne submitted to me for the first time in his life. His throat worked against my skin. His hands came up, trembling, to hold my arm like it was the only real thing left in his world. When I finally pulled away, the wound on my wrist was already closing. I looked down at him. "Still think I'm Barren?" I asked softly. He laughed once, broken, wet, disbelieving. Then he bowed his head to my thigh right there in front of everyone and whispered the words the entire hall heard, "My Luna." The betrayal was fatal, but not for him, for everyone who had ever dared to stand against us. The marble beneath my knees was slick with blood, mine, Zane's, the guards he'd killed on his way up from the cells. Darian's head rested heavy against my thigh, breath ragged but steady now, my blood burning the poison out of him one heartbeat at a time. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Lyric and Ezra climbed the dais again, two small figures in black, moving like ghosts through the stunned crowd. They stopped in front of the throne, the same throne Viridia had lounged on an hour ago like a queen. Lyric pulled a thin silver chain from beneath her collar. On it hung a tiny crystal vial no bigger than a child's finger filled with swirling black liquid. Ezra carried a leather-bound ledger, edges charred, pages warped by old fire. The hall went deathly quiet. Lyric's voice rang out, clear and merciless. "This," she said, holding the vial high so moonlight struck it, "is the same poison that killed my mother and father. Viridia brewed it herself. She made me watch while they drank it at dinner. I was 4. A collective inhale sharp enough to cut glass. Ezra opened the ledger. Every page was covered in Viridia's elegant, looping script, names, dates, methods, High Alpha Selene of Crescent, Nightshade in the Wine, 3rd moon of the 17th year, High Alpha Orion of Eclipse, Wolfsbane in the bedding, same night, Lord Commander Riven, throat slit, blamed on rogues. 17 more names, allies, witnesses, anyone who might have spoken for me. Ezra looked straight at the assembled nobles. "She kept trophies," he said. "Locks of hair, signet rings. My father's eclipse pendant is page 12. He turned the book so the front rows could see the tiny braid of midnight hair glued beside Orion's name. A low growl rolled through the hall. Pure animal fury. Lyric uncorked the vial. The stench of nightshade and silver nitrate filled the air. "She was going to use this on King Darian tonight," Lyric continued. After the naming, slow enough that everyone would blame grief over the Barren exile's dramatic return. Then she and Zane would rule through the human baby until it was old enough to tragically die. After that, the throne would be theirs forever. She looked at Viridia, chained between 2 guards at the foot of the dais, and smiled the coldest smile I have ever seen on a child. "We took it from her rooms the night she tried to burn us alive. We've been waiting." Viridia thrashed against the silver, screaming denials that no one believed anymore. Ezra closed the ledger and laid it on the throne like evidence in court. Then both children turned to Darian. He was still kneeling, my blood on his lips, face ash pale beneath the returning color. Ezra spoke again, softer now, but every wolf heard it. "You signed the execution orders for our packs, Your Majesty. You believed her when she said we were dead. We aren't." Lyric stepped forward and placed the poison vial in Darian's shaking hand. "Justice or vengeance," she said. "Your choice." The silence was so complete I could hear Darian's heartbeat, stronger now, thanks to me, but breaking all the same. He looked at the vial, then at the ledger, then at the 2 small survivors of his blindness. His shoulders began to shake, not from poison this time, from the weight of 17 murdered names and 3 living children who had every right to want him dead. He lifted his head and looked at me. I met his gaze without mercy. I didn't need to say it. He already knew. He rose slowly, legs unsteady, and faced the hall. His voice, when it came, was ruined, raw, but it carried to the rafters all the same. Viridia Silvertongue, once Luna of the Obsidian Crown, I strip you of title, name, and protection. You will be taken to the pit cells. Tomorrow at dawn, you will drink what you brewed for others. Your lover Zane will join you. Viridia's scream was inhuman. Darien ignored her. He turned to the guards holding her. Take her. Gag her if you have to. I'm finished listening. Then he looked at Lyric and Ezra. His voice cracked. I have no right to ask forgiveness. I will spend the rest of my life earning it anyway. Your thrones, Crescent and Eclipse, will be restored. Your names cleared. Your dead honored. He dropped to one knee again, this time to them. Lyric studied him for a long moment. Then she did something no one expected. She placed her small hand on his bowed head. We don't want thrones, she said. We want a family. Ezra nodded. We already have a mother. Both children turned and walked back to me. I opened my arms. They came into them without hesitation. Darien watched, tears falling unchecked, as the last pieces of his old world crumbled around him. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, and for the first time since the night he rejected me, I felt something other than rage. Pity, the kind that comes right before the killing blow. I stood, my children tucked against my sides, Cashin's hand in mine. I looked at the hall full of wolves who had once cheered my humiliation. Let it be known, I said, voice ringing clear, that the obsidian crown passes through my son, Cassian Blackthorn, firstborn and true heir. Any who dispute it may face me. Not a single wolf moved. I looked down at Darien. Get up, I told him. He did, slowly. You're still breathing, I said. That's a gift. Don't waste it. Then I turned my back on him, on all of them, and walked down the dais steps, my 3 heirs with me. Behind us, Viridia was dragged away, still screaming. Zane was carried, bleeding and broken. The ledger and the poison vial lay on the throne like relics of a dead reign. Justice had been served. Vengeance was only getting started. And the Alpha King, saved, shattered, an utterly minded judge, watched us go with the way a drowning man watches the shore disappear. He would live. But he would never forget the price. Dawn broke cold and silver over the palace. Viridia and Zane were already in the pit. The execution had been short, public, and silent. No speeches, no last words. Just 2 cups of their own poison forced between clenched teeth while the entire kingdom watched. When it was done, the bodies were burned without ceremony. The ashes were scattered on the wind before the sun cleared the eastern ridge. There would be no graves for traitors. By the time I stepped onto the grand balcony, the sky was the color of moonstone and the courtyard below was packed shoulder to shoulder with wolves. Cashin walked at my right, Lyric at my left, Ezra 1 step behind. All 3 wore black, but their moonstone cufflinks caught the first light like small, defiant stars. Darien was waiting at the balustrade. He had not slept. His formal coat was gone. He wore only a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, the rejection brand I'd once carried now inked over his own heart in fresh black lines, 3 claw marks crossed by a broken crown, then mended with a new crescent moon. He had done it himself at midnight with a silver needle and no anesthetic. I knew because I had watched. He turned when he heard our footsteps. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he went down on both knees, not to the crowd, but to us. The Alpha King of the Obsidian Crown knelt in the cold morning light and bowed his head to a woman in blood-streaked red silk and 3 children the kingdom had tried to erase. His voice carried without effort, raw and stripped of every ounce of pride. Lena of House Voss, true mate of my soul, mother of my heir, guardian of Crescent and Eclipse. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was blind. I tore out your heart and called it mercy. I nearly destroyed everything the goddess entrusted to me." He looked up. Tears tracked clean paths through the soot on his face. "I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I will spend every day of my life earning it anyway, if you will let me." Then he turned to Cassian. "My son," he said, and the words cracked open something inside the boy I had never been able to reach. Cassian's silver eyes shimmered. "I did not know you existed. That is my greatest shame. But I know you now, and I will never leave you again." Cassian glanced at me. I gave the smallest nod. He stepped forward and placed his small hand on his father's bowed head, just as Lyric had done the night before. "You hurt my mother," Cassian said, voice steady. "But she taught me that real strength forgives when it's hard. Hard. So I forgive you. But you have to earn it every day." Darian's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Lyric and Ezra moved next. Lyric placed the restored crescent crown, small, ancient, reforged overnight, in Darian's hands. Ezra laid the eclipse circlet beside it. "We choose the obsidian pack," Ezra said simply. "We choose you, if you choose us back." Darian looked at me over their heads. I felt the bond flare, white-hot, aching, alive. I walked forward until the toes of my bare feet touched his knees. Then I cupped his face with both hands and pulled him up to meet my eyes. "I will never be the girl you rejected," I told him, loud enough for the entire courtyard to hear. "I am the Luna, who came back from hell with your heir and 2 kingdoms on my shoulders. If you want me, you take all of me. The scars, the rage, the children I would burn the world down to protect. Take us, or step aside forever." He rose slowly, eyes never leaving mine. Then he dropped the crescent and eclipse crowns at my feet and went down on one knee again, this time only to me. "Take me," he said, voice breaking. "Break me. Rebuild me. I am yours. The crown is yours. The kingdom is yours. Everything I am, everything I will ever be, belongs to you and to them." He pulled the royal obsidian circlet from his own head and held it up to me with both hands. The courtyard held its breath. I took the crown. I turned to the sea of wolves below, and I placed it on my own head. The roar that answered shook the mountains. When I turned back, Darian was still kneeling. I reached down, threaded my fingers through his hair and pulled him to his feet. Then I kissed him. Not gentle, not forgiving yet, acclaiming. Teeth and desperation and 3 years of grief and fury and love that had never died, only waited. The bond snapped taut between us, golden, blazing, unbreakable. Power poured through it. His, mine, Cassian's, the Ward's, the entire pack's, until the balcony stones cracked beneath our feet and the dawn sky lit up like wildfire. When we broke apart, both of us were shaking. I pressed my forehead to his. "Welcome home, my king," I whispered against his mouth. He laughed once, wet, stunned, joyous. Then he lifted me off my feet, spun me once under the rising sun, and roared to the kingdom the words every wolf had waited a lifetime to hear. "Behold your Luna! Behold the Obsidian Queen and the mother of our future!" Cassian, Lyric, and Ezra ran to us. We caught them up, 4 heartbeats becoming one, while the pack howled until their voices cracked. Later, when the sun was high and the palace quiet again, Darian found me in the Luna's chambers, our chambers now. He closed the door, leaned back against it, and looked at me like I might vanish. I walked to him slowly, red gown finely discarded, wearing only his shirt and the crown I had not yet taken off. I stopped, a breath away. "Still breathing?" I asked softly. "Barely," he answered. "Good." I slid my hands under his shirt, over the fresh brand that now matched the one he'd once burned into me. He shuddered. "I will spend the rest of my life on my knees for you," he said against my lips. "If you'll let me." I smiled, slow, wicked, finally gentle. "Start now." He did, and somewhere in the rising heat, the last scar between us turned into something new. Not forgiveness earned in a single night. Forgiveness earned in a lifetime of mornings just like this one. The rejected mate became the undisputed Luna. The broken bond became unbreakable. And the obsidian throne finally had its true queen, crowned in fire, tempered in exile, wearing the love of 3 impossible heirs and the devotion of a king who would never be stupid enough to let her go again. We ruled, we healed, we loved fiercely, forever. If this story made your heart race, your eyes tear up, and your soul scream for rejected mates who rise like phoenixes in blood-red gowns, then you already belong in Judy's romance library. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next obsessed alpha who's about to get destroyed and rebuilt by the way only a real queen can do it. Drop a crown in the comments if you're Team Lena forever. And if you're craving more second-chance, revenge-soaked, scorching hot werewolf romance right this second, smash that notification bell. I drop new chapters every day, and trust me, the next story is even wilder. Thank you for crying, screaming, and howling with me. See you in the library, my loves.